welcome back to another episode of FinTech Walkabout. I'm Will, where we're deep diving into the experiences of interesting people in the world of FinTech and cool businesses, joined by two guests for the first time, Will and Pete from Tread. It would be great to get just quick introductions from yourself. Who are you? What is Tread? The works.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Will, one of the co-founders. Tread's been born out of the thing that money has a massive impact on the planet. Whether it is through where your money's kept, but also what you do with that money. And there isn't really a fintech out there that helps you do both of those two things. So that's what Tread's been born out of, and what we're actually here to do. We're here to make money work for both people and the planet. So we do two things. So one is that we're a green debit card and a green banking platform. We don't invest in fossil fuels. I think it's really important. Instead, we invest a lot of money in tree planting. So what that actually looks like is we're the first carbon neutral banking provider in the UK. And we're very proud to say that. The second thing is that people wanted a support to be greener. So we do three things on that one. So one is that we help people track the impact that they're having. So whether it is through the Tread debit card or we actually use some open banking, and we can give people a view of what the impact that they're having. The second thing is that people wanted support to be greener. So it's all right tracking your footprint, but what do you actually do about that? So we help people reduce that. So we've got, I think, 70 different brand partners we work with now that helps people reduce their impact. And then the third one is we also integrate carbon offsetting to the platform as well. So it's a bit like a green Monzo with a Fitbit for climate change.
I've done that before.
Yeah, the full pitch.
That's the man on investor comms, isn't
it? So I'm Pete. We've been going for like 3 years officially now, but in earnest about 2. But we've known each other for a few more years than that. So we actually met in university 2011. Worked out quite quickly that beyond the friendship we could probably do a business together as well. But it was his idea that you had about 3.5 years ago. Sat me down in a pub in the Lake District one night, which is where all good ideas should come from. And pitched it to me and I said, do you know what, great idea, let's see whether we can make it work. And here we are.
Brilliant. Probably a couple more beers so I can tell the true story of where Anton was born, but
go on.
No, just kidding. So from university, what were you guys studying, and then into consultancy, what was the gig there?
Yeah, so we studied mechanical engineering. I remember the first lecture, the lecturer said, I hope I haven't got 80 people that are about to become bankers and financial advisors. And we all thought, oh no, we're here for the engineering.
3 years later.
4 years, it was a 4-year course. Studied that, enjoyed it. It's very analytical. You learn to problem solve, and that's the whole point, which naturally moved us on to consulting. So we both worked as operational consultants, which means you can be sent into quite literally any business. And we did between us hospitals, aircraft carriers, supermarkets, a clothing chain, an olive factory, railways,
call centres,
like so different, but always given a problem to solve, which we spent like a decade between us doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Will's idea naturally progressed from how do you make olives not hit the floor and go in a pot to how do you start solving climate change, and specifically through the lens of an individual.
Okay, and so how did you, what specific learnings did you take away to then trigger that shift into not just carbon neutral but financial services as well?
So the whole idea came from, we used, the whole thing was around using data to basically make people make better decisions. What that led to was we wanted to apply ourselves to something that was like a bigger problem than just olives falling into a pot. And then so we said, right, well, where should we focus in the climate space? Should we help vertical farming? Should we help airlines? Should we help whatever it was? We didn't know the answer. So which one is the biggest of those issues? And so it then became quite apparent that I didn't know my carbon footprint, no one else did, and then the whole thing basically spanned from that. Transpired that the easiest way to get like an automated reading of that is through your financial transactions, and what you do, where you buy it, how much you're buying, etc. And that then led to some early interviews. There was a really rubbish Excel that we built, pulling bank statements, and then from then it went to, well, why can't I bank with you rather than just like tracking impact?
Okay.
That's then expanded into like we're a green neo bank.
Yeah.
Kind of growing arms and legs very quickly, hasn't it?
Scope creep, I think you call it.
Took its a life of its own, I suppose.
Yeah.
it's funny because it's very similar to how we started AppTap.
A rubbish Excel.
Yeah, terrible Excel. Actually, a Google form in our instance that just kind of like fed into it.
That's a different
Then
podcast.
it's a really horrible Excel. But no, we looked at kind of how do we help people improve based on their spending, but take it from like a budget lens and then into what actions specifically can we help people take, so cancel switching, signing up, that sort of thing. Started by just telling people like stop taking an Uber, take the bus instead, and like all of these people on the street being like, well, I wouldn't use that. that sounds awful. You're just like abusing me. So that's how we've honed in on kind of the actionable steps. But running a fintech is hard enough by itself. Running a carbon neutral fintech, how's that going? Because that's I mean, there's two whole catches of fish in that, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was part of our strategy from day one, which I think has benefited.
Yeah.
We're not a big ship trying to change tracks. We put the right building blocks in place from day one. And what I mean by that is the first bit of code we wrote, we made sure it was not only efficient code in terms of speed, performance, but it was also carbon friendly. Our tech stack we chose minimized the energy that we would be using. And it's things like that, policies that we put in place, the people that we hired, they all tend to have a very similar motive when they join Tread. So it's definitely not easy. It's slightly easier when you know you're going to do it.
You just commit.
Yeah, you commit. And there's frameworks we've used along the way. So, we publicised that we're B Corp pending and on the road to become fully fledged B Corp. That framework's really helpful.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that you're not just getting the E of ESG right, but the whole bank shoots. So we keep on going like that. Have you ever thought about it at AppTap?
B Corp?
No, the whole could you become carbon neutral?
It's something that kind of we've been part of an Innovate UK Smart Grant and had to address that quite up front. What are we doing? So it's trying to reduce impact on mainly our infrastructure and our servers. But initially we took the position of, well, let's start by just helping customers. And at the end of the day, I think our biggest kind of thing is technology. That's where our carbon footprint is happening. So wrapping our heads around like how do we improve on AWS, I think it's pretty difficult. And so this is a waffly way of saying kind of, but in a non-committal way. But 86% of all energy switches that have happened through AppTap have gone to a green provider. Which is great, right? And there's a very obvious kind of appetite from consumers to go that way. We're seeing that in some of the small businesses that we're speaking to as we look at new products and services, but especially for consumers now with cost of living crisis, it's 2 parts of your E and your S. Really. I mean, there are some core challenges in it, and that kind of leads me on to the next question. What have been the big kind of core challenges over the last couple of years?
I think setting it up, it's really difficult to bring a debit card to market, especially because our background wasn't in finance, it was in very operational, just normal businesses. And so I think that was a very, very steep learning curve that we had in the first year. Because we basically worked in the background for a year, working evenings, weekends, any free time that we had. And just getting to, speaking to as many people as possible. But that, it was we had to learn a lot about regulation. We had to learn a lot about how to market a product. Had to learn a lot about finance, just basically everything that surrounds it. Sounds like basically everything. It was.
But I think that was our experience. We went from being really good at a specific thing, operational consultants, go in, get a load of data, find a problem, improve it, to having to be as broad as possible. Will has been our accountant for 2 years now.
I know how you feel.
I mean, the amount of things someone said, oh, have you thought about this? And we've just never
of course we
before.
have.
Yeah. Oh, we need insurance for that. Oh, definitely have.
Yeah, already got that.
But it's staggering how many times that you come across that same thing, and it's going to keep happening, obviously. We are surrounding ourselves with people who've done it before now. Yeah. And you join networks, as you were talking about earlier, that help you because you can live and bounce off. But there are so many unknowns when you get into this.
Yeah. I bet, especially the world of green, where it's pretty opaque.
Green and finance, so the regulation that exists in the world in the financial sector is phenomenal, especially in the UK. But you've got to learn it, and then, and as an industry, green is very, very infant, right? It's new, so there isn't as much regulation. It's kind of opinions at the moment, but some of it's coming down the track, so trying to keep abreast of that at the same time is tough.
Yeah. So what were the driving factors behind like B Corp? You're obviously very passionate about it. So what was it that really like triggered that? I mean, we're part of a generation. We're all moving that direction, hopefully. But what were the kind of core triggers in that? What was that driving force?
I think the main thing for us was because our whole product is built around helping anyone be greener. We then thought, right, well, we have to be doing, and we are doing the right things. So we thought, right, well, how many different certifications can we get to say, look, we're doing the right thing as a business, and therefore we can help you. So it was, it kind of made sense to align to B Corp. There's also another one called 1% for the Planet, which we're part of as well. And I think that really helped. And also, there were early days were things we just hadn't even thought of. That going through the questionnaire, how many different was it? 80 something questions? I can't remember the exact number. Which kind of goes through what's your policy on this, or what's your like new parent leave, what's your etc. And then because of that, we had to think of so many different things. And then it's also set the foundations now in the direction of travel that we are doing the right thing. And it kind of basically sets us on the right path from the off rather than having to shift.
How's that influenced kind of consumer comms? Because you're staking your flag essentially. No carbon, no fossil fuels.
Will's not taking this.
Investments and
Will supports the marketing team, not me. So I'll say it's definitely a proof point.
Yeah.
It is a badge of honour that we wear, and we make sure that our customers and potential customers know about it. But that comes back from the very first consumer testing that Will was talking about. It wasn't good enough that we provided a product that helped someone live more ethically. It had to be provided by a business that's doing the same thing. We needed to live those values before we asked an individual to do it.
Nice.
So that's kind of one of the proof points we use to say, hey customers, we're doing exactly what you wanted us to do. Yeah. So come use us.
What about investors then? Is it a similar story? Because I mean, generally speaking, money in the UK is coming from older demographics. Who might not be as in tune, putting it politely.
There's a mixed bag. So over the past, I think B Corp last year just hit their 1,000th B Corp in the UK. Cool. As it gets more and more traction, more and more people hear about it. So some investors knew exactly what it was and were like, that's fantastic. There's been big investment into greener businesses. Yeah. So having that seal of approval, ace. Others, never heard of it. There's a real spectrum in between. The bit that we are now doing is it's almost like a two-way thing. So it's one way for investors to like vet us that we're kind of doing the right thing, but now actually there's more and more VCs becoming B Corp, and so it then quite easily like a matchmaking exercise. So it helps us do the due diligence on that like investors as well.
Yeah. Do you think as more and more people get B Corp certified, and this goes for kind of any certification, do you think that dilutes the impact of having that stamp? I mean, I was having this conversation with a group of fintechs yesterday around ISO qualification, whereby so many are now getting it. It becomes kind of a checkbox for those doing regulatory DD, and it's they end up just doing the same DD they would even if you didn't have it. So what is there like a turning point in that? So do you think?
We have always been. We need to be doing the right thing as a business. We will also help all of our customers do the right thing. Yeah. So we're really happy with where we are because if everyone became a B Corp, great, like fantastic movement and everyone's going in the right direction. The thing that we do on top of that is like we kind of are supporting people to be greener. So I think on average we've got about a 6 to 7% reduction in carbon footprints from people that join Tread. So it's not just like look at us as a business, we're doing well. It's like we're enabling others to do well as well. Which I think is kind of a key differentiator. Because your bank's so personal to what you're doing, it kind of sees everything and it has it can be such a force for good. It just isn't being used in the right way at the moment, and so that's where Tread comes in.
So what would you, if you had to give advice to other startups, like me at AppTap or other kind of eco-friendly focused startups, what would your kind of core pieces of advice be? Besides run.
I think there's the main ones would be starting right from the off. That's a kind of easy one. We've spoken about it slightly earlier. The other one would be like keep it positive. So like you'd have to read far on the news. It's quite doomy, gloomy climate change. So making sure that you put the positive spin of like, actually, these are the 5 things we can do to kind of shift focus away from the earth's burning through to, actually, this is the way we should be going.
Yeah.
Those would be one of my 2 biggest.
The only thing I'd add is we've been amazed how, not open book, but supportive a sector it is. I mean, we had a conversation with our main competitors a couple of weeks ago, and both parties were on the call saying the amount of genuine advice and support you get from other businesses because you're doing a good thing is phenomenal. Yeah. I think the earlier you realise that and lean into it, the better, and join that community and start getting advice, supporting other people, and helping everyone push forward.
I kind of found that across FinTech generally as well. I don't know if you have, but I've been able to sit down with competitors in a similar way and have pretty friendly conversations.
Yeah, which is good.
A couple of cagey ones, which are always fun. What's been the hardest thing to make carbon neutral or green? You know, you've gone everything to your debit cards, to your socks.
Yes,
branded bamboo socks.
they're in the pipeline, bamboo socks. We haven't gone just yet. Finance needs to sign off.
I think a real challenge is your third-party vendors.
Mm-hmm.
So we both businesses use open banking.
Yeah.
As an example, I think you use TrueLayer.
We do. Yeah.
We use Plaid. But we're talking about huge multinationals who haven't yet really started on that journey. And your choices are very limited. So some of the banking technology we bring to our users is supplied by third parties. Yeah. And what do you do? Yeah. Especially as a small safe startup, hey, we're going to have 100 cards in the next 6 months. What's your net zero plan? Why aren't you changing? It's really difficult.
Leverage.
Yeah, so there's a bit about selection. So the due diligence we do on a third party is intensive, especially into their green credentials. So that's important. But there's also what pressure we can apply to them to do better. We have seen little changes.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
We've actually had a little question at the end of negotiations like, hey, do you want to do some tree planting with us?
Yeah,
you know, we're doing it, match it. And actually, we've seen quite a lot of traction behind that at the moment. So, you know, they're little things. We're not talking huge scale, but you know, every little helps. We're trying to pull people, kicking and screaming.
That is not a Tesco.
I wanted to do that.
A little clap.
Yeah, no plugs for Tesco.
So you talked about open banking, which is kind of the central theme of this podcast. I should probably speak about it. How are you leveraging it? What's the plan? You're using Plaid. Is it something that's central to the business? Is it supplementary? You know, what does it do?
It's actually where it started.
Okay.
So the original business model was use open banking to pull in another debit or credit card spending data, turn that into a carbon footprint and offset it.
Yep.
It was quite simple, way easier to describe than the current one.
Yeah.
But we realised we needed to go a bit further. But we've never dropped that as part of our technology. So even today we have a product feature called Tread Connect, and that's where you can follow that same path. So alongside your Tread debit card, you can connect as many other credit or debit cards as you want, pull those transactions in, and then, and only then really, you have a full picture of your carbon footprint. We get that people aren't going to use the Tread debit card for every single thing they spend on right now. Most people have a credit card, most people have a bricks and mortar bank at the moment. Yeah. Normally the one that they use at university or just after leaving school, and it's hard to get them away from that. Yeah. But we want to make sure someone has full insight, and that's where the open banking piece comes in.
So how important is it that your consumers kind of understand that? Because I mean, we like to ask this question, usually ask it at the end, but does it matter whether or not customers know what open banking is, or is it more about what you can kind of put on the table for them?
So open banking is a tricky one, and there's a lot of faith and trust you need to win over with your customers before they believe that it's the right thing to do. And we learnt that early days in testing.
Yeah.
We almost didn't have a disclaimer, and we said, hey, just give us your bank account and we'll see all your transaction data and off we go.
The one thing you've been told never to do.
Well, exactly, yeah. And that very few people were willing to do that, obviously, and we've learnt a lot. So we branded it Tread Connect. The sell really is you get a full picture of your carbon footprint. The barrier right now is giving people confidence that they can connect their bank accounts. Mm-hmm. It's completely safe. you're not exposing anyone to that data, and most importantly, you have full control over it. So it's very important to our product offering. We only rolled out Trade Connect 5-6 months ago.
Yeah, if not sooner.
Sooner, yeah. And the usage that's come from it's phenomenal.
Okay, cool.
People are engaging.
Yeah. Is that all account information services, or are there payment negotiations?
Only Asp at the moment, but I have aspirations to go further.
Sure.
Especially to do stuff like top up the trade card.
Yeah.
But it's all Asp at the moment. But it just means that people can start using the app more and more. Oh, what's my balance across all my accounts? I can go to Tread. Great. I'm using it as a budgeting service as well. Oh, there's my carbon footprint. What's that looking like at this moment? What can I do about it? So it's a real engagement piece for us. It's amazing for our impact. There's a bit of a confidence thing.
I was going to say, we were speaking to someone the other day, and they said that it's actually really difficult to be the main financial hub, as it were, for an individual, because you could go into your Barclays or your Monzo or whatever it is and connect in your cards, but no one really does. So putting the layer of carbon footprinting on top of it means that actually there's an incentive and there's a reason why you would do it. Yeah. So we've seen loads of people connecting, actually, haven't we?
Yeah.
And the transaction volumes are crazy.
You'd probably say the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like the technology came, but no one really had the use case for it. And then things like Tread and AppTap are finally finding genuine use cases for this technology that banks have invested millions in bringing to market.
Yeah, for the sake of a slightly charged question, maybe an AppTap's favourite.
Do you think budgeting?
Yeah. What do you think about that? Well, what is it? What are you allowing customers to do? So you talked about offsetting. What's your take on offsetting kind of from a long-term sustainable business perspective? And then, what are you enabling your customers to do?
Good question. So for us, the number one thing is reducing your carbon footprint.
Sure.
So, and we're building a whole section at the moment of how you can use spending data, whether it is Tread cards from open banking, to give people insight into what they're doing, how they can reduce it, suggest different vendors, etc. But the whole focus is around. We're actually decided this week, isn't it? We're trying to go for CO2 reduced or CO2 saved, emissions saved. On the offsetting side, we then have a button that you can tap in the app, whether you want to pick renewable energies, tree planting, building materials, etc. And so we basically use that as a kind of reduce first, offset if you want to. I was going to say longer term, the idea is to sort of shift more towards the reducing than offsetting, but it's there for people that want to do something.
You talked about 70 partners around reducing what does that look like? What does that entail?
So that's an early part of our app, which is all about tips, tricks, and advice so you can actually do something. Will's already spoken about how we want to avoid being the doom and gloom app that you take out of your pocket, go, I'm not doing a good thing, and you're either going to delete it. Yeah, you are. So we're trying to move away from this theory of we're tracking your carbon footprint to we're tracking how much of an impact you've had so far, and then give you tactical ways of increasing that number. Yeah. So the vendors that Will was talking about was where you can go to reduce your carbon footprint. So let's talk about an Honest Mobile plug. Well done. They are the UK's only carbon neutral mobile phone provider, network provider. So Vodafone, EE, etc., aren't doing anything. Honest is carbon neutral. We'll spot a transaction that says you just spent your monthly thing. That's kind of like yours actually.
This is the future, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
So we'll spot Vodafone and say, hey, have you heard about this vendor? It's carbon neutral. It's a very similar price. Swap to them.
Well, this is it, right? Relevant, timely, contextually right, and that's
actionable.
Kind of what we speak about.
Actionable, because so often you see mass media put out top 10 things you can do for the planet. Yeah. And number one will be a heat pump. Number two will be an EV, and you look at your bank account and think, I'll see you in 20, 30 years, hopefully.
Saw one today on Twitter that was, I think it was UK Gov that tweeted out, here are the 5 ways in which you can save on your energy, throughout winter. And the top response was, how am I supposed to turn my thermostat down a degree when it's already off? It's like, there you go.
There you go. People want relevant, actionable advice.
Yeah.
And coming back to open banking, it's getting a real blueprint of a person through transaction data is where you can start.
Yeah. What do you say to the naysayers? Like, what are the kind of points of contention or reservations that you get from customers? I mean, there's the obvious kind of data sharing, but what else are you seeing?
That's a good question. The main one's security. Like, is it safe?
So what is it that, are there any specific pushbacks or anything that you get from consumers, any reservations or anything around just the Tread product as a whole? Obviously there's, we get that around open banking, just the data sharing piece, but what are you getting back from customers?
So I think overall the fact that we're a carbon neutral banking provider, people absolutely love it. I think the thing that we found a bit more difficult than we initially thought on the journey was actually getting people to switch across. So, it doesn't take much to put 16 digits into your, Amazon account or, whichever apps you have. But I think that is a barrier. And so we've been doing a lot of work on how you make it as simple and easy as possible to, put money in for the first time, make sure that the card doesn't take too long to arrive, all those different things to make it like a slick, easy, and like a no-brainer.
Basically, you got like the HSBCs, the big banks of the world, putting 150 quid, incentives behind switching over to their accounts, right? So
and we're an early stage startup. We just can't afford 550 quid. But
there's products that people will always ask for. Apple and Google Pay is our number one requested feature. And we could just say we're working on it. It's a minimum 6-month implementation project with each party, and you have to do it one after the other because one's funny about launching a product with the other one. Let's not get into that. And that's really difficult to work to do. As a product team, to hear the same number one product feature requested every single time, and we can't deliver it straight away. So that's a frustration for customers because they're saying, "Come on, I want to use you. I really want to use you, but I haven't walked out with a card in my pocket for months." And that's true. We even did. We've done surveys, and the blurb at the top has said, "Please tell us your number 1, number 2, and number 3 top features. Apart from Apple and Google Pay, we're working on it." And still in that survey, the number 1 requested feature was Apple and Google Pay.
That's just the middle.
That's good. I mean, we've got engaged customers. They're telling us what they want, and you bring them along. You bring that along, and hopefully it increases usage.
Did you see any disparity in what customers ask for in terms of where they are? Because obviously you're based up in the north, versus a lot of our customers, interestingly, are in Scotland because of our relationship with TSB. So, we get very different asks from those in Aberdeen and Glasgow versus those in London who are probably a little bit more used to the pays and the contactless payments and that sort of thing.
One challenge we're always going to have in that vendor marketplace, so in those bits of advice, is individuals would love it to be hyper-local. So I've always spoken through this story of, imagine the time when you get off a train, you're on your daily commute, you walk into the office, and just before you walk into Starbucks, your phone, your Tread app goes, "Hey, don't go into Starbucks. Did you know about this independent, carbon neutral, organic, fair trade, super awesome, independent,
2 minutes,
same price, 2 minutes away. Get it before the deed is done." But to curate that for the whole of the UK and beyond is tough. But we know that's the kind of thing people want. So that's always going to be a headache for us. Do you do the classic, let's get London first because it's one of the biggest cities in the UK and you tend to have lots of customers there. We spoke about, do we do leads? Because we're a leads-based business, that's where the office is, we can try and engage with our customers on our doorstep. But that's going to be a huge challenge for us.
So who do you target? Is it the kind of eco-friendly millennials? Is it those who are have more significant expenditure in later on in life who might be able to make more of a difference if they got more savvy?
Early days, we thought when we started out it would be your Gen Zs, millennials, just exactly who you're picturing.
Every FinTech.
That's
target.
exactly.
What? You did
and,
it too.
And then we basically did our first round of user testing, and it wasn't that at all. And I think at that point we realised that we're not just going after like a specific geography, a specific age demographic. There's almost like this vertical that is sustainability focused. So we have like people of all ages, all locations. Typically tends to be slightly more city based than urban, but than rural. But yeah, it tends to be either your Gen Zs, millennials, or the parents of the Gen Zs and millennials that are caring about the environment, and that almost like slither is kind of our core market.
Okay, so what's coming this year then for those people, and is there any is there any like pressure associated with being the kind of flag bearers for, carbon neutral green fintech? There's a couple out there. You got the Kogos and the Connected Earth and those sorts of guys you spoke about Honest Mobile a little bit. But in terms of being, a neobank, a green neobank.
I could do. So, our pressure comes from all different directions. The one we listen to a lot is our customers. There is a real challenge between a product that hits the minimum usability standard and a green product. Because frankly, if a product is terrible but really good for the planet, very few people are going to accept it.
Yeah, that was our V1.
Yeah,
way back, and it was garbage.
I mean,
straight in the compost.
So was ours, to be fair.
I mean, like dairy alternatives were terrible, and people who wanted to switch away from dairy just weren't because they couldn't suffer it.
Yeah. Whereas now,
they've got there.
The oat milk.
Yeah. It's delicious. I think it's better than coffee, but that's anyway. We're at the stage where we need to hit that like almost minimum usability that other neobanks in the UK have given to go mass market.
Mm-hmm.
That's the pressure. It's not this, but it's almost, hey team, you kind of need to do this so I can use you properly. I'm really supporting you here. I love your mission. I want to be a Tread ambassador.
Yeah.
I'm going back to Apple and Google Pay here. Get me Apple and Google Pay, and then I'm going to tell every single one of my friends. So that's
the next thing that you unlock. The next.
Well, and it's that balancing act. We can't just pursue only green endeavours in the product and the business. We have to make sure we're hitting the other like usability and reach that we need to have the impact we're looking for. So that's a bit of pressure, and it gives us a nightmare when it comes down to sprint planning.
Yeah, I bet.
What do we do now? All of it. Can we do all of it?
Yeah.
That's fine.
How many times do you hear we need more debt? Just if you give me 2 more devs, we can just do this and just.
It's a constant battle, isn't it?
What about the regulator? What could they do to kind of double down on this? In your dream world, what does the SCA, the CMA, what do they do to push this forward?
That's a really, really good question. I think the thing that we found is that actually we've been, I'm trying to think what it's called, the Green FinTech Challenge. We're basically working with the FCA at the moment.
Great.
In like a sandbox environment, to say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of the carbon tracking, which is at the moment fairly unregulated. We're doing carbon offsetting, which again in the financial world is fairly unregulated. And so we're working with them to sort of say, what does that look like? How can we be working better? And actually making some standards around it, because the worst thing for us would be, because you've mentioned Kogo, there's several carbon tracking platforms out there. The thing that will undermine the whole industry is, you open one app and it's got one value in it. You open up the next one and it's got a completely different value in it. But there's just no consistency at the moment. We've been working a lot with different universities to make sure that it's like grounded, the methodology's good, we've had sign off on it. But that kind of stuff is a bit more difficult.
I totally agree. I think it's also exposing and challenging banks' investment theses.
Yeah.
What's that fact you like banding around?
Yeah. So the
wasn't going to be a podcast about it.
Well, I was going to say, so if you have about £5,500 is kind of like what an average-ish person has in their savings account. If you have it in a high street bank, it can have the same impact as 7 return flights from London to Rome.
I think I saw this in LinkedIn the other day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've done the rounds of it.
Isn't it staggering?
It's just because of the banks take your money in the deposits and then loan it out to BPs, Shells, etc., etc. And that's just we don't think that should be a thing.
So that's hidden impact that an individual has no idea. I used to bank with HSBC. If you asked me 3 years ago,
Say that.
Stop that. If you asked me when I first opened that, what they're going to do with my money, wouldn't have a clue. So I think there is something about exposing that so the individual can make a better decision.
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of education on our part because no one really knows that. So making sure that people actually start questioning, and we've seen it, to be fair, that as soon as someone kind of hears that and it becomes in the news, you have to look far on the BBC, the more it comes out, the more people are like, well, actually, are there alternatives to this? And then obviously we're really well positioned now to say, actually, if you want a carbon neutral or like a good banking provider, like we're the one for you.
Nice. I've addressed the cheeky little Slack notification while we're there.
Yes.
Because if I don't, it's going to be like
They say more devs.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about consumer, £5,000 per customer account on average sort of thing across the UK, but vast majority of people in the UK are employed by small businesses and let's be real, corporates are where most of the money is held in terms of where banks are investing money. So any plans to move into kind of B2B banking space?
Yes.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. There's a huge opportunity in two things. So one is business banking. You're right. I think it's 98% of companies are SMEs, something ridiculous like that. And so why can't we help them be greener? So because we do carbon tracking, net zero planning, carbon reporting, we can kind of automate that all pretty instantly. And so that's a huge opportunity. The other one is as well, because we've built a lot of the carbon tracking tech, offsetting, etc., we can then start actually packaging that up as a product to help other fintechs, and other companies do the exact same thing with the carbon tracking. So yeah, there's a subtle plug we're signing up businesses to our waiting list at the moment, so it's on our website.
Brilliant. We'll go sign up. Why
Definitely.
not?
Yeah, why not? That's exactly
So you've talked a little bit about your marketplace before, may as well touch on it. How do you extrapolate that out into the world of kind of SME, because there's a whole lot of kind of relationship management there. Can you talk to the kind of problems, challenges, the wins and things that have happened and kind of how that might apply?
Yes. So that was an unconfident yes.
Yeah, compared to the last yes.
So there's two halves of it. So for in the partnerships in terms of who are we recommending to our customers, constantly looking for new businesses, whether it is fashion companies, it's groceries, utilities, whatever it is. So we're always interested in hearing from people to say, actually, we think we'd be a great fit, and we think we'd be a great fit for them. And so that's one side of it. The other side is then making sure we have the right partners for us as a business. So whether it is through helping other businesses do the carbon tracking, it's business banking, and so they're kind of the two halves that we're progressing.
Cool. Right, we are coming up to time. Had a lot of fun. Question I always ask: open banking so far, success or failure? If you had to choose. We get two answers.
So my take on it is, from our point of view, which is an early stage startup, I think it's a phenomenal success. The reason I say that is it gives us so much information that we wouldn't necessarily have access to without open banking. So it allows us to do carbon tracking